currency.
Where are you? I'll be honest, mate. I'm getting an incredible tan here. You should see it. Honestly, you should see them over there. It's fantastic. There's a person over there selling coconuts. What?
What's the what?
Hello and welcome back, and today we are looking at the Synology 920 new release and comparing it against its predecessor, the DS918 Plus. We've done a lot of comparisons in the past, but not many of them have been conducted in this manner. Of course, at the time of recording, this is during the COVID-19 epidemic, and we've gone lockdown, we've gone self-isolation. So I'm here in the studio and Eddie's there in his own Wonder Palace. I don't know if you guys know about it. It shows up on Google Maps and it's largely made of diamond and stainless steel. So it's quite a nice edifice. It's the only other edifice visible from space as well. It's quite unique. It's in the shape of a giant star. I won't bore you with it. Just go on Google Maps. Anyway, so today we are talking about the old versus the new, with Eddie representing the DS920 series and me championing its predecessor, the DS918. We're going to talk about which one is best for you and which one is best for your data. So let's get straight into it. Eddie, why should someone be looking at the brand new DS920 from Synology?
There's only one thing really what has changed, and it is CPU. And the increase is quite significant. It's like 20–30% better benchmark. So yeah, those who probably used it for transcoding, those who used it for virtual machines, for web servers, email servers, all these things, there will be a significant improvement to see, because the CPU is going to be able to transcode more streams and let more people to interact with your website and things like that. Apart from that, there's no other ports, and because there's nothing needed, because 918 is really up to date to a degree.
Okay, well, exactly your point about
cache.
To a degree, yeah. I mean, in terms of hardware, you're right. That CPU is a big step up. But in every other regard, what you see as a NAS that gives you, a good level of everything, I would say it's a little bit coasted in every other degree. I hope I'm wrong. But with regards to the hardware, do you not wish there was something more on the 920?
I've always been hoping that they will finally introduce PCIe slot for a 4-bay, because they might think like, okay, Celeron is kind of budget and this sort of model number for CPU, but it is still capable of delivering something around 700 megabytes a second transfer speeds, which could be like a really great solution for 4K beginner editors, something like that, because all they need is something around 300–400 megabytes a second bandwidth, and 918 would easily deliver this speed.
920.
Yeah, 920. But unfortunately, they are not adding this for some reason.
I mean, presumably it's on screen already, but just in case it isn't, the CPU inside the DS920 Plus is the Intel Celeron J4125, a very new generation J4000 Gemini Lake processor at 2.0 gigahertz that can be burst up to 2.7 gigahertz on a 4-core processor. It also arrives with DDR4 memory, 4 gig to be precise, which can be upgraded up to 8 gig. It arrives with 2 M.2 NVMe SSD slots for caching, as well as 2 1GBE ports and USB. And I think we both know I'm about to attack the 1GBE, because I'm representing the 918 today, which has got an older generation CPU, the J3455. It's a 1.5 gigahertz processor that can be burst up to 2.3 gigahertz per core, and it also arrives with 4 gig of DDR3L memory that can be upgraded to 8 gig. So a slower frequency CPU, less efficient CPU, and lower speed memory as well. But in every other regard, it's exactly the same. It's got the NVMe SSD cache, it's got USB 3, and it has 2 1GBE LAN slots. So really in today's video, it is about 2 factors. One, right now, if you don't own a 4-bay Synology and you're looking at buying either the 918 or the 920, should you go for new or old? Or more appropriately, if you own the 918 currently, should you upgrade to the 920? And I think with regards to both of those, I would say no. I think the 920 right now is a very, very good NAS. I genuinely believe that. But the 918 is so close to it that if you've got the chance to buy the 918 right now, consider it, because it's going to arrive at a very, very good price point. Whereas the 920, although we don't have a confirmed price at this stage, do you think it would be arguable to say that it's going to be 50, 60 pounds more expensive at least? What do you think?
An existing model,
Over
it should
the
be around the same price. It's going to be the same price as the old one, but they will drop the prices for the old one, so there will be bargains really for 918.
Exactly.
And this is the first time to get them.
So 918 right now, you're probably going to be seeing it arriving. If not already, then very, very soon, you're going to see it at a very competitive price. And therefore, the 918 has that extra attractive factor to it. I mean, if the 920 had featured that increased LAN capacity at 2.5 or 5 GBE, this would be a very, very different conversation. And I think Synology are embracing 2.5 GBE, but much, gradually than other brands out there. And I think Synology, we've seen it already on that 6-bay, the DS918 XS, formerly known as the DS918 XS, just shown off last year in kind of precursor form, and the Q&A that we filmed and documented with Taiwan has shown us that NAS is still going to arrive later this year. It does support 2.5 GBE, and I'm surprised that the 920 hasn't adopted the 2.5 GBE LAN standard. I mean, do you not think that's a reason that people should be second guessing the 920 as a purchase?
I don't think so. There'll be ever 918 replacement in a visible future with any 2.5 gig or 5 gigabit ports, because predominantly it's made for small businesses or home, and those home users do not have 2.5 gig or 5 gig or 10 gigabits Ethernet available. XS series are different. Those models are made for like decent businesses with like 20 plus users, and they got their own server rooms where they got 10 gigabit Ethernet in place, which is very often backwards compatible. So you can actually connect this 2.5 gig LAN port to this 10 gigabit switch. But in a normal situation, no one will have these connections, and Synology wouldn't risk it to have a situation when someone buys 920 or 922 and they cannot connect it without upgrading their existing network.
I think, but the same argument we could have had almost 3 years ago now with regards to the 918 when it featured NVMe SSD Cache built into it. It was the only commercial home NAS at that time that supported NVMe SSDs and also included it, as a caching option. Caching is something home users are very rarely going to take advantage of, and I think it would have been very forward planning for the 920 to feature greatly increased gigabit Ethernet ports, particularly given that the internet speeds these days, we talked about in a previous video, that we're reaching a point soon where internet speeds are far surpassing LAN speeds. And when you're dealing with NAS versus cloud storage, the idea that upload and download speeds over the internet are challenging in a real way internal LAN speeds. I think this is something that Synology might have been a tiny bit short-sighted in incorporating into the 920 currently. I mean, another thing to bear in mind, of course, is that ISPs are starting to roll out routers that have 2.5 GBE. Manufacturers like Netgear, Asus, and more are starting to incorporate 2.5 GBE, and we've got AX Wi-Fi, 802.11ax Wi-Fi 6, becoming a little bit more prevalent on our day-to-day devices, our tablets, our mobiles. These are devices that are starting to incorporate Wi-Fi 6 in an affordable manner. And the idea that a NAS, a network attached storage device in our network at home, even a small business, would be throttled in that way, I think is enough. Not enough to not buy the 920. The 920 is a great device, but it's enough to bear in mind, just a little thought to think of the future, because there isn't going to be another 4-bay expandable follow-up for at least 2 years, a 922 or whatever they'll call it. And that one definitely will feature increased LAN. But it's,
exactly. With 5G coming out, and 5G can already, in really best situations, can deliver a gigabit Ethernet, connection speed. So in that case, really people will need to connect some sort of 5G adapter to a Synology to have faster network than the gigabit could offer. But that's true. When big players like BT, Virgin, or something will roll out these new routers with 2.5 gig or 5, probably 2.5, then there will be infrastructure in place. And probably in that case, if all these broadband like companies do roll these out, then we could potentially see 922 series coming out with 2.5 gig, because then Synology will have nothing to say against to not upgrade. They'll have to do this, you want it or not.
Which brings us back to my earlier point. If you are someone that has purchased the current 1.8 generation, or you own a 918, to me that means that the 920 in that realm, if you do own an 18 series NAS and a 718, a 718, maybe a 218, or even a 418 Play, or indeed the 918 Plus, I don't think the 920 is a big enough jump in that regard. I mean, we talk about, I mentioned earlier on about Synology getting ahead of most other hardware providers with that great NVMe SSD cache system, but they also not a company that jumped on board 10 GBE before anyone else. They've really kept, as I said before, 10 gigabit Ethernet at arm's length for a very, very long time. And we've only just, I mean, we might, before the end of the year, fingers crossed, see the release of that NVMe and 10 GBE combined cache card, So there's still a company that's prioritizing internal performance over external performance. And I think that has been a little bit short-sighted in the 920. And that's really my only core argument against buying a 920. I think the 920 is probably is still the most powerful 4-bay that Synology have ever produced. But it's just a real shame that they've clipped its wings externally in the case of those LAN connections.
But I would still get a new one, a replacement for 918, because Synology products, very similar like Apple products, do not devaluate in time that quickly. So you can very often see that second-hand Synologies are priced very similar, like almost brand new Synology. So if you sell your Synology, the money you will lose is going to be so small that it's going to justify your upgrade. For sake of £50 or something, you'll have a new, much more powerful NAS.
Do you know what? That's a very interesting third option there. If you do own an 918 right now, given the support of SHR and Synology's ability to take those old drives, install them, and still have access to the data, that is a very interesting point about selling the 918 right now. I don't know the going rate for a second-hand 918 right now. Probably 250, 300 Nicker. You might get second-hand. I know the prices fluctuate around at the moment now that the upgraded model has arrived. But there is an argument for that, the idea of swapping out and making a saving in between. Is it safe? I can't tell you that that's a very safe way to do things, and there will be a period when you may have no NAS unless you're kind of buying now, sell later and stuff. But, I mean, for you, what is missing from the 920 Plus? Because you mentioned something in a previous video about the CPU featured on the 920 versus 918. An interesting point about transcoding.
Yeah, I was checking what sort of these 600 series GPU chip look like, and it looks like for HDR content is not as good as it used to be for 918, because 918 used to, if I have a look, they used to do encoding and decoding for H.265 8-bits, but 920 does only decoding for this, and 10-bit H.265, which is HDR content, they seem to not decode or encode at all, where 918 and 1019 did at least decoding. So I hope these specs are not updated or wrong, but it looks like this new GPU version doesn't look as good as our previous version.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how these two compare in terms of performance when we've got the 920 with us and do a comparison, both software and hardware, against the 918 and 920. One interesting thing I would highlight is the 5-bay, that 1019 Plus. It arrives with that same CPU as the 918, and it arrives with 8 gig of memory, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see that device upgraded to 2.5 GBE down the line. I can totally see that happening.
That could be because 1019 was a replacement to 1015, which was already a decent sort of NAS, which had 4 LAN ports, and they replaced it with these 2 LAN port like options. So there is a possibility that a 5-bay is the magic number when Synology start treating NAS seriously and add things to it.
But I mean, the CPU, as mentioned, the CPU benchmark score, we've mentioned in other videos of that J4125, again, is around 3030, 3035, whereas the J3455 on the previous generation was around 2500, 2400, something like that. So
it's around 28% increase.
28, okay. Cool, thank you for the correction. But overall, they're so similar that once again, I do find the 920, it's an upgrade, but not a huge upgrade. And if you look at a lot of the responses that we got to our early coverage of the 920, that's kind of one of the biggest bugbears. A lot of people have felt they've waited 2.5 years for an upgrade here, and it doesn't seem like an enormous leap. The CPU certainly is a great leap. And again, there aren't that many CPUs in the Celeron family that they could have picked. The J4125 is frankly one of the newest Celerons you can go for that's supported in the world of NAS. I know there is a J5000 series out there, but it's not matured enough for this area.
I think the improvement is quite big. Anyway, I wish there was Pentium like they did with 916, and then they switched to Celeron afterwards. They could have used that again. But this increase of 30% in CPU power and DDR4, these 2 things are really, really, really important. They will speed up your NAS significantly for internal caching as well, like using RAM and the regular caching.
I mean, normally at this point in the videos, we would talk about performance of software and active number of users at any given time. But on that score, the 918 and the 920 are very, very similar. Yes, you know, a flat run, the 920 will eventually outpace the 918. But in terms of base level use, 5 to 10 users, unless they're all doing something particularly dense, like a bunch of VMs or 40 cameras at once, or trying to transcode 3 or 4 1080 things at once, both of these NASs are going to stand up very well against one another in terms of performance. Overall, you're really going to have to push them to see the distinct differences between them. You mentioned support of certain file formats of encode and decode at H.265. Was it 8-bit or 10-bit? Sorry, I know you mentioned it. Just
yeah, 10-bit, 10-bit H.265, which is HDR. It looks like the new CPU doesn't cope as good.
But in terms of brass tacks, if you were a Plex Media user, so I'm going to rally off some, before we end the video, some nice, straightforward, give me an answer, 920 or 918. So if I'm a Plex Media server buyer, which should I buy?
918. Still, you won't see a difference. Yeah, 918.
If I want to be a surveillance user, which should I buy?
918 will be cheaper.
If I want to take advantage of Synology software, which should I go for?
920.
Okay, for that extended utilization.
And DSM7 coming up, yeah.
If I'm a virtual machine user, which should I buy?
920.
And if I currently own a 918, which should I stay with it, or should I swap it out and go for the 920?
Either just like sell it and get something new, or wait for next model.
There you go. I'm going. You know what? There was some agreement there in the end. I mean, same warranty from Synology there, both expandable warranty, same ports and connections, both supporting those NVMe SSD caching bays. Just before we go, it's worth highlighting something we've touched on in other videos before, and I just wanted to come back to it very, very quickly. Increasingly, we are seeing a lot of users talking about that little QNAP adapter. I think I've got one there. The 5 GBE to USB adapter we've talked about before. Now, we know that it's not truly compatible with the Synology platform. There is some homebrew GitHub downloads to get it running, but it's by no means stable. It often reboots, and it's one of the main reasons we never really featured it on the channel. We did some experimentation, getting one of these working with the Synology, and although that downloadable GitHub driver works, it is by no means reliable. And if you restart the NAS, it forgets it, and it just didn't make it reliable long term. So that's why we didn't really make the content. But once we've been testing the Acer Store 2.5 GB adapter, and we've tested a StarTech adapter, and we are finding that some 2.5 GB adapters to USB are being supported by the Synology platform. And at the same time, we're seeing slight indications, at least on a software level, that Synology are at least tinkering with this side of things. So don't be surprised if sometime in the next 6 whatever months, if Synology started at one time, said, right, we've got our own adapter, it wouldn't surprise me if that's the way things go. And if we're bearing, you think? Are you not convinced?
Yeah, because I think we ruined it for them. Because when QNAP came out, it was their 10 gigabit card, and we put them in Synology's, and it did work perfectly. And then Synology found out that we did that, and they somehow removed in the software the ability to work with QNAP cards. And I think just because it features probably the same chipset on the card, what you can find is an adapter. That's why adapter doesn't work. So,
oh, by the way, I should add, he's Ed says we. He means the NAS community in general. That would be fantastically arrogant. But no, I mean, I would not be surprised if we see a Synology adapter to allow people to take advantage of 2.5 and 5 GBE over USB. And when that happens, things are going to change massively. Whether they do that they choose not to go down that road because they don't want to harm later units, I'm not sure. But in that world, if that comes out, if that adapter arrives, 920 all the way, baby, because you are going to be having one of the best disk stations out there when that happens. But apart from that, we'll wrap things up here. I hope this video has been helpful in some way. I know there's a lot of congested things we're throwing around there, and we will crystallize this a great deal more when it comes to full release of this NAS. We're going to be doing comparisons against QNAPs next. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, click like. If you do want to learn more, click subscribe. Do visit the links to span.com and, of course, NAS Compares to learn more and get hold of your brand new NAS from people that know their stuff. And apart from that, Eddie, did I miss anything?
no.
Wow, the confidence in your voice is overwhelming. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, good wave. Just one wave. Come on.
Oh, like this?
Great. Is that even your arm? See you later.
No.